Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to Everything Within podcast. I'm your host, Alina Krasnojon. This podcast is all about empowering you to build an extraordinary, fulfilling life and tap into the limitless potential that resides within you. Thank you for tuning in today. Remember when you were a child and spent hours building elaborate blanket forts? No one asked you about ROI or productivity metrics. No one demanded to know the purpose of your imaginary worlds or questioned the efficiency of your make-believe games. You could spend hours or sometimes days playing without any particular goal. For some of us, it has been such a long time since we experienced these feelings. We're draining in our daily obligations, jobs we don't particularly like sometimes, feel constantly stressed. So it's even hard to remember how it felt like doing something without any particular purpose. Just play, just be, just enjoy the activity itself without any particular goal. Play was the cornerstone of my childhood, and it shaped me in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. Growing up in my grandparents' home, I often found myself alone. My parents working long hours, my grandparents tending to their endless garden tasks, and no neighborhood children to share my adventures with. But this solitude became my creative playground. I became the architect of my own entertainment, crafting intricate stories and worlds within worlds. I wasn't just playing, I was simultaneously the producer, directing elaborate scenarios, the actor, bringing characters to life, and the audience completely immersed in these self-made adventures. These weren't just games. They were my first lessons in creativity, problem solving, and emotional intelligence. Though I wouldn't understand that until decades later. Today we're going to explore something that might feel radical in our productivity-obsessed world. The power of doing things for absolutely no reason at all. We will dive into why play isn't just for children, how we lost touch with purposeless play, and most importantly, how to reclaim it. Let's begin. Let's be honest, we've somehow managed to turn every moment of potential joy into another task to optimize. Our smartphones buzz to remind us we haven't met our step goal. Our meditation apps shame us for missing a day of mindfulness. Even our sleep gets graded each morning, as if our unconscious hours need a performance review. All this creates a lot of pressure inside of us, guilt, shame, especially during the days when we let ourselves fall off track and be unproductive. We tend to forget that being unproductive is necessary and sometimes is the most productive thing you can do. Rise and grind, no days off, sleep when you're dead. These aren't just motivational quotes anymore. They are the mantras of the culture that's forgotten how to simply be. The hustle culture has infiltrated every corner of our lives, turning even our leisure time into another opportunity for self-improvement, or worse, monetization, as if everything in this life needs to be monetized. You might think that our obsession with productivity and work as virtue has always been there, but it cannot be far from truth. The ancient Greeks actually viewed work with suspicion. Leisure, or what they called skole, wasn't just free time. It was considered the highest form of human activity. Aristotle believed that leisure was the foundation of everything important in human life: art, philosophy, and politics. So what changed? Entered the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, particularly Calvin's concept of predestination. Suddenly, hard work wasn't just necessary for survival, it became a sign of moral virtue, of divine favor. This religious view of work as salvation gradually transformed into what we know now as Protestant work ethic. By the time capitalism took hold during the Industrial Revolution, this idea of work as virtue had become deeply embedded in Western culture. But here's the thing, this isn't universal. Let's look at some other perspectives. In many Mediterranean cultures, there is still the concept of dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. It's not seen as lazy, it's seen as essential to a well-lived life. In Japan, there is the concept of ma, the appreciation of empty space and pause. Traditional Buddhist cultures value being present over constant doing. Even some modern European countries like Denmark, with their concept of hygge, prioritize contentment and presence over productivity. But then social media came along and turbocharged our productivity obsession. Suddenly, we're not just competing with our neighbors, we're competing with carefully curated highlights from billions of people. Everyone seems to be hustling, achieving, optimizing. The rise and grind mentality isn't just encouraged, it's celebrated, gamified, and monetized. And you end up comparing your behind the scenes over somebody else's highlight reel constantly. But freedom, as it turns out, has its own kind of terror. Even when I had more freedom, because I didn't have a regular office job anymore, freedom that allowed me to buy groceries at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, I still found myself haunted by invisible eyes judging me for daring to live my life on my own terms, and feeling constantly guilty because I didn't work hard enough or earned enough money. I just couldn't give myself a break. It took me years to accept that some days could be purposefully empty. Not to drown in guilt, but I didn't spend my entire Saturday cleaning, not to feel shame coursing through my veins when I walked outside during working hours. The dream I'd worked so hard for had arrived, even if it wasn't perfect, but I brought all my old programming with me, and it became my mental prison. This struggle didn't come from nowhere. From my earliest memories, force was the language of love and care. I was forced to eat when I wasn't hungry, forced to study when my mind yearned to wander, forced to spend countless hours planting potatoes in my grandparents' field, because this is what good children did. Every moment had to have a purpose. Every action had to build towards a better future than my parents and grandparents had. But here's the thing about human spirit. It rebels. My soul refused to be neatly packed into that box of shoulds and must. It rejected being defined by grades, by obedience, by silence. Even as a child, something deep within me knew there had to be another way. So I made myself a promise, the kind of fierce, determined promise that only a child who has tasted too much control can make. When I grew up, I would build a life that brought me joy, a life where no one else would dictate how I should feel or what I should do on a daily basis, a life where play wasn't just a reward, but a right. The irony, that promise led me here, to this moment of freedom, only to discover that the hardest prison bars to break are the ones we have internalized. That the most demanding taskmaster isn't your boss or your parents or society, it's the voice in your head that inherited their rules. That nagging voice in your head that whispers you could be learning a new skill right now while you're trying to enjoy a sunset. Or this could be a side hustle while you're sketching just for fun. It's the mental economist that never stops calculating the ROI of your joy. And these rules, they weren't just taught to us, they were woven into the very fabric of our childhood consciousness. Think about it. From our earliest moments, we're bombarded with messages about success and achievement. Cartoons where characters always need to win, to be the best, to achieve some grand goals. Children's books celebrating little engines, always pushing, always striving, never content with simply being. Even our bedtime stories often revolve around characters accomplishing something extraordinary. Our parents themselves, products of this system, unknowingly reinforce these messages. What do you want to be when you grow up? Not what brings you joy or what makes you curious, but always about future productivity, future contribution, future worth. Every gold star, every report card, every good job trains us to seek external validation and achievement over internal contentment. Then there is the media. Commercials showing us what we need to buy to be happy, successful, worthy. Social media amplifying these messages. Before we can even form our relationship with success and happiness, we're programmed to equate them with endless striving and accumulation. This programming runs so deep that even when we intellectually reject it, emotionally we're still caught up in its grip. It's like trying to unlearn your native language. Possible? Yes, but requiring constant awareness and practice. The voice that says you should be doing more isn't really your voice at all. It's the collective whisper of a culture that profits from our perpetual dissatisfaction. Breaking free from these internal constraints is a daily practice. It's in the small moments of rebellion, taking a midday walk, leaving the dishes for tomorrow, spending an hour cloud watching, that we begin to rewrite those early stories of force and should. Each time we choose joy or obligation, play or productivity, we're not just making a decision, we're healing the child that was never allowed to simply be. And perhaps that's the real freedom, not the absence of structure or responsibility, but the presence of choice, the ability to say, today I choose to do nothing, and feel not guilt, but gratitude. To understand that sometimes the most productive thing we can do is absolutely nothing at all. It's a journey of unlearning, of gentle rebellion, of coming home to ourselves. And while those ghost watchers might never fully disappear, their voices grow quieter with each act of joyful defiance. Because in the end, the only approval we truly need is from that fierce, playful spirit within us that never stopped believing in a different way of being. There is something that happens to your soul when survival becomes your only language. Let me share a piece of my story that still catches in my throat when I tell it. When I moved to a foreign country, my world shrank to the size of basic needs once again. As it was in my childhood, every single thing became about survival. Learning a new language wasn't about culture or connection. It was about not being misunderstood at crucial moments. Finding work wasn't about career fulfillment. It was about the next meal, the next rent payment, the next bill. Studying wasn't about growth. It was about desperately trying to prove my worth in a foreign country. The guitar I once played for hours gathered dust in the corner, a silent witness to who I used to be. The songs I loved to sing died in my throat, replaced by rehearsed interviews and carefully pronounced foreign words. It wasn't just about not having time, it was deeper than that. The very desire to create, to play, to simply be had been crushed under the weight of survival. I moved through days like a ghost, haunted by anxiety about the future and weighted down by self-esteem that scraped rock bottom. I remember thinking, maybe I'm lucky someone will hire me. After all, what right does a foreigner have to be picky? The gratitude for any job, any chance, any small opportunity became a bitter pill that further eroded my sense of self-worth. My parents' voices echoed in my head. An office job is prestigious, respectable, so when I found myself in service jobs, shame became my constant companion. I felt inferior to everyone who had studied at fancy schools and landed jobs at prestigious companies. Every person in a suit walking past me seemed to embody everything I had failed to become. My job wasn't just my source of income, it had become my identity. Without it, I was nobody. With the wrong kind of job, I was somehow less than nobody. It was tearing me apart from the inside, this constant battle between survival and self-worth, between what I need to do and what I thought I should be. Every day felt like a reminder of the distance between my reality and my dreams, between who I was and who I thought I needed to become. This isn't just my story. It's an unspoken narrative of so many who leave everything familiar behind in search of something better. It's about how survival mode doesn't just affect your bank account or your schedule. It fundamentally alters your relationship with joy, with creativity, with very sense of self. It literally rewires your nervous system. When you're perpetually worried about basic survival, your body stays in a state of high alert. Your cortisol levels remain elevated. Your muscles always tense. Your mind can't fully rest Over time, this state becomes your new normal. You don't even notice how your shoulders are always slightly raised, how your jaw is always slightly clenched, how your breath is always slightly shallow. And perhaps the cruelest part, when you're in it, you don't even realize how much you've lost. You're so busy surviving to notice that you've stopped living. Growing up in poverty leaves deep marks on your psyche. Even now, when things are objectively okay, there is this constant undercurrent of anxiety, a hypervigilance about financial security that never fully goes away. It's like your nervous system is stuck in perpetual survival mode, making it nearly impossible to justify doing anything just because every activity, every moment gets filtered through the lens of how can this help me survive, or how can this make money. And there is the cruel irony of our current culture. You take this trauma response, this survival mode thinking, and repackages it as a hustle culture. We're told that every hobby should be a side hustle, every interest should be monetized, every moment of joy should be transformed into content. Turning your passion into profit, they say, as if the only way to justify doing something is by making money from it. Even years later, when you're successful by most measures, good job, stable income, bills paid on time, there is this constant background hum of anxiety. It's like your brain never got the memo that you're safe now. You might have money in savings, but you're still scanning for threats. Every unexpected expenses triggers that old familiar panic. Every financial decision carries the weight of past trauma. This hypervigilance seeps into every aspect of your life. When you're scheduling your day, your brain is automatically calculating the monetary value of each hour. When you're considering a new hobby, before you can even feel the excitement, your mind is already asking, but how could this make money? When you're resting, there is this nagging voice whispering, you can't afford to waste time. It's exhausting, this constant cost-benefit analysis of every moment. What to spend an afternoon drawing? Your poverty-programmed brain immediately starts thinking about how to turn it into a side hustle. Feel like learning a new instrument? The same vigilance voice asks how it could contribute to your financial security. Even simple pleasures, reading a book, taking a walk, watching the sunset, get filtered through this lens of productivity and potential profit. Even our hobbies have become hostages to capitalism. The cruel irony is that this survival response, this constant need to justify everything through its monetary value, doesn't actually make us more secure. Instead, it robs us of the very experiences that make life worth living. It's like we're still rationalizing joy even when there is plenty to go around. Dr. Stuart Brown, founder of the National Institute of Play, has spent decades researching play in both humans and animals. His findings are fascinating. Play isn't just a childish distraction, it's fundamental to our well-being and sleep. When we lose our connection to purposeless play, we don't just lose joy, we lose creativity, problem-solving abilities, and even our capacity for innovation. The cost of this mindset is staggering. We're seeing unprecedented levels of burnout, anxiety, and depression. When everything becomes a potential source of income, nothing remains a source of pure joy. We created the world where rest feels lazy, where play feels unproductive, where doing something simply because it brings us happiness feels almost rebellious. The numbers globally are horrible. According to the World Health Organization's research, over 60% of workers worldwide report experiencing burnout, with some countries showing even more alarming rates. In Japan, when they have a word for a death by overwork, karoshi, 84% of workers report feeling burnout. In South Korea, studies show that 7 out of 10 office workers experience what they called guarosa, or stress-related illness from overwork. European studies aren't much more encouraging. Research from Gallup, spanning 128 countries, revealed that 76% of people feel burnout at least sometimes, with 1 in 3 experiencing it frequently or always. In the UK, the Mental Health Foundation found that 74% of adults felt so stressed they've been overwhelmed or unable to cope. In emerging countries, the pressure is even more intense. In India, a recent study showed that 89% of professionals believe they are burnout, with young workers being particularly affected. Chinese workers face similar challenges, with 73% reporting significant work-related stress and burnout symptoms. What's particularly troubling is that these aren't just statistics. They are warning signs of a global crisis in how we approach work and productivity. The World Economic Forum has labeled burnout as a pandemic on its own right, one that's costing the global economy an estimated $1 trillion annually in lost productivity. Yet, despite these alarming numbers, we keep pushing ourselves to optimize every moment, to be more productive, to do more with less time. We're literally forced by companies and corporations to do more in less time, even when there is no particular reason to push workers all the time, to be stressed all the time and work faster. So all this external programming getting internalized by us, which creates a nagging inner voice that is telling us to be constantly productive. Here is something crucial I've learned on my own journey. Before you can even think about embracing purposeless play, you need to regulate your nervous system. Think of it like trying to dance while standing on unstable ground. Before you can move freely, you need solid footing. When you're in survival mode, your nervous system is like an overworked security system, constantly scanning for threats. And playfulness feels not just difficult, but almost impossible. The past few years have been transformative for me. Having time away from the conventional office environment gave me space to explore who I really am, what brings me joy, what lights me up, without the constant pressure of productivity metrics and performance reviews. I discovered that feeling, not thinking, is the secret language of our inner, most authentic self. Through meditation and breath work, I learned to stay present in my body, to notice tension, to recognize how different activities affect my state of being. These practices became my anchor, helping me recenter when I feel lost and inspiring my creative work. When I regulated my nervous system, something unexpected happened. It didn't just change the way I felt, it transformed how I viewed my entire approach to business. Like peeling away layers of conditioning, I began to see clearly how much anxiety-inducing marketing doctrine I'd internalized. Our nervous system operates in 2 primary modes: sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze, or survival response, and parasympathetic, rest, digest, play, our safe and social response. When we're chronically stressed, we get stuck in sympathetic dominance. This state increases cortisol and adrenaline, tightens muscles, speed up heart rate, narrow focus to potential threats, make creativity and play feel impossible. For those of you wanting to regulate your nervous system, here are some approaches that have worked for me. Deep, slow breathing, especially extending the exhale. Regular movement that feels good to your body. Time in nature, humming or singing. It stimulates the vagus nerve. Cold exposure, like ending showers with cold water, for example. Gentle touch or self-massage. I do gua sha face massage for reducing tightness of my jaw muscles, but it can be anything. Creating safety signals. Establish predictable daily rhythm. Create comfortable physical environment. Set and maintain healthy boundaries. Build small, consistent self-care practices even when you don't have time, even if you don't feel like it, even if it's just 5 minutes of doing something for yourself daily. It can completely change your life. Develop supportive relationships. After doing all this, you can start gradual exposure to play. Once your nervous system begins to regulate, you can start incorporating small elements of play. Start with structured activities that feel safe. Choose activities from your childhood that hold good memories. Begin with short duration, even 5 minutes. Practice in private spaces where you feel secure. Give yourself permission to stop if it feels overwhelming. Don't push. Don't expect it to be perfect. Remember that you're doing it for the sake of activity, not for the end result. Now let's talk about how to actually start cultivating play. The first thing you can try is environmental setup. Create dedicated spaces in your home. Keep playful items visible and accessible. Minimize digital distractions during playtime. Surround yourself with people who value play. Mental shifts. Recognize that play is a biological need, not a luxury. Understand that unproductive time is actually crucial for creativity. Accept that play might feel uncomfortable at first. Acknowledge that play looks different for everyone. Practical approach. Start with productive play. If pure play feels too challenging, combine play with movement, dancing, sport, yoga. Explore creative expressions, art, music, writing. Find playful ways to do necessary tasks. Join communities or groups that emphasize play. Maintaining practice. Schedule regular play times. It's vital. It's not something you do once per month and forget about it. Create accountability through play dates or groups. Document your play journey if it feels supportive. Celebrate small victories in embracing play. Notice how play affects other areas of your life. Watch closely how it makes you feel, what emotions come up, your mood. Signs that you're ready for more play. Your breath becomes naturally deeper. You catch yourself smiling more often. You feel curious about new experiences. Your body feels more relaxed. You have moments of spontaneous joy. You're less reactive to stress. There are common obstacles that can block you from playing more. And the first one is I don't have time. It's a very common one. But start with 5-minute play breaks. Integrate play into existing activities. Notice time spent on social media or TV that could be playtime. The second one is I feel silly. Start in private. Find like-minded people. Remember that feeling silly is a part of the process. Start with more structured forms of play. And the third block, I don't know how to play. Observe children at play. Recall childhood activities you enjoyed. Try different types of play until something resonates. Join adult plays, workshops, or classes. Remember, the path to play is not linear, like almost everything in life. Some days you will feel more playful than others, and that's perfectly normal. The key is to create conditions where play becomes possible, then gradually more natural and eventually essential to your well-being. Start where you are. If regulating your nervous system is what you need right now, that's your first step. If you're ready to find small moments of play, begin there. There is no rush, no competition, no right way to play. The only measure that matters is whether it brings you joy. Breaking free from the productivity police isn't just about scheduling useless time, though that's a start. It's about fundamentally shifting how we view our relationship with time, creativity, and worth. It's about recognizing that our value isn't measured in outputs, metrics, or dollars. It's about trusting that when we create from a place of genuine joy and presence, we're doing exactly what we are meant to be doing. What if the true purpose of any activity is having no purpose at all? I know. This feels almost heretical in our purpose-driven world. As humans, we're wired to seek meaning, to look for patterns, to create purpose in everything we do. It's part of our survival programming. But there is something powerful about giving yourself permission to do things without a purpose, without clinging to an end result. Think about watching waves crash on the shore. There is no goal, no outcome, no measure, no measurable benefit. Yet, in those moments of pure presence, something profound happens. You're not just watching waves, you're experiencing life in its purest form. When you release your grip on purpose, when you stop obsessing about monetization and metrics, that's often when the magic happens on its own. It's like trying to catch a butterfly. The harder you chase it, the more it eludes you. But sit quietly in the garden and it might just land on your shoulder. I've experienced this firsthand in my work. Yes, I have visions and plans. We need those. It's important. but I've learned to hold them loosely, to practice what I call intentional detachment. It's this delicate dance between having direction but not being consumed by the destination. When I create content now, I focus on being completely absorbed in the process. And surprisingly, this approach has led to more authentic connections, more meaningful work, and yes, even better results. Though that's no longer my primary focus. The science behind this is fascinating. Our brains aren't designed for constant productivity, for the relentless pace of modern work life, 5 days a week, almost year-round, under constant pressure, doing tasks that often feel meaningless. It's no wonder we're seeing epidemic levels of burnout. Have you ever noticed how your best ideas often come in the shower or on a walk, or just when you're drifting off to sleep? That's not coincidence. When we step away from active problem solving, our brains enter what neuroscientists called the default mode network, a state where creative connections naturally emerge. You cannot force creativity any more than you can force a flower to bloom. So what does it look like in practice? Let me share some ways to embrace purposeless joy, cloud watching and stargazing. There is something profoundly human about looking at the sky and letting our imagination wander. No need to learn constellations unless you want to. No need to understand cloud formations, just looking. Collecting pretty rocks. Not to make jewelry, not to sell them, not to create Instagram-worthy display, but gather them just because they catch your eye, because they feel good in your hand, because they speak to something primitive and joyful in your soul. Dancing alone in your room, not to get fit, not to learn choreography, not to film for social media, just moving your body in whatever way feels good, letting the music move through you without judgment or agenda. Here is the crucial part. And this is where many of us struggle. These activities need to stay pure. The moment you start thinking about how to turn your rock collection into an Etsy shop, or how your cloud watching could become a mindfulness course, you've shifted from being to doing, from playing to work. We're not designed to go, go, go all the time. Our souls need nourishment. Our creativity needs space to breathe. Our relationships need presence and playfulness. The corporate world might demand constant productivity, but our inner selves demand something else entirely. Moments of pure, purposeless joy that remind us we're more than our outputs, more than our metrics, more than our contributions to the GDP. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to invite you to a small but powerful journey. This week, I'm challenging you to schedule 30 minutes of completely purposeless play. Now, here is what makes this challenge different. We're not tracking it. We're not trying to turn it into a habit or a productivity hack. This is just for you, just for the experience itself. And I would like to give you some guidelines. Choose something that has absolutely no practical benefit. Pick an activity that you wouldn't put on your resume. Select something that makes your inner productivity police uncomfortable. Do it without documenting it or sharing it. Most importantly, notice how it feels in your body, not just your mind. Pay attention to 3 distinct moments. Before you begin, notice the resistance, the excuses, the guilt. They're all normal. During the activity, observe when you start to relax, when your mind stops trying to justify the time spent. After, feel the difference in your energy, your mood, your creativity. Remember, this isn't about becoming more productive or more successful. If you find yourself thinking, this will help me work better, gently let that thought go. This is about reclaiming a part of yourself that existed before spreadsheets and optimization. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the weight of survival mode thinking to the freedom of purposeless play. But perhaps the most important insight in this: joy doesn't need to be justified. Pleasure doesn't need to be productive. Your worth isn't measured in outputs. When we follow our genuine joy, when we allow ourselves to play without purpose, we often find ourselves exactly where we need to be. Think about it. Every major breakthrough, every moment of innovation, every leap forward in human history came not from forced productivity, but from someone allowing themselves to wander, to play, to be curious, to explore without knowing the outcome. This is what creativity is all about. As you go forward from this episode, remember, your nervous system needs play as much as it needs rest. The most meaningful moments in life often have no practical purpose. You don't need to monetize your joy. Being unproductive is sometimes the most productive thing you can do. I will leave you with this thought. In a world that's constantly asking what's the point, perhaps the most radical act is to answer there isn't one, and that's exactly the point. Give yourself permission to play, to wonder, to simply be. Until the next time, bye!